housing company to invest in education. Cardinal Ribat wants more voice on domestic violence and HIV and AIDS. And Minister Pundari says climate change crucial for PNG.
This is the National EMTV News with Mary Bartulo.
A very good evening. Thank you for joining us for Sunday's news. The Port Moresby-based National Fraud and Anti-Corruption team, led by Senior Detective Charles Kukari, has explained they took the Madang Provincial Administrator, Daniel Aloy, in for interview last Thursday based on 3 reasons. Mr. Aloy was alleged to have been implicated in misappropriating 550,000 kina intended for maintenance and refurbishment of the Madang Governor's official residence. A minor contract agreement based on the variation of the scope of work with new comba construction of 400,000 kina exceeded the initial verbal contract payment of 150,000 kina. This was a breach of the works law for interim contract works. But the money was misused and no work was done on the property along Kalibobo Drive. Mr. Aloy was also alleged to have bypassed accountable and responsible officers when making the payment to Comba Construction. The National Fraud and Anti-Corruption team also found there were no payment vouchers for the initial 150,000 kina. Instead, a payment history at Treasury Office corresponds to the building company's bank details for work done at the official Madang Governor's residence. The Edai Town Development Limited will not only concentrate on building houses but also expand on building education services. Director Kim Yong told MTV News today they are planning to start a school as part of their contribution to developing education in Papua New Guinea.
The Edai Town Development Limited is expanding into building education services, with 10,000 people expected to reside in the 2,000 homes by 2019. There will be a need to provide education services for residents and locals in the surrounding villages. It will begin with the Early Childhood Program.
So the first step is we build a nice environment. So the infrastructure, we have a big piece that will beat any city early learning center, because most of the cities, they come from a house and they convert. Here we're building the early learning center. So the kids will have plenty of space, not just to play around, but to learn. So they'll have outdoor learning, indoor learning. Nowadays, kids learn very fast.
A concept for primary schools has been developed using the dual system from the national and international syllabus.
It's a worldwide Cambridge syllabus. So that will bring the kids to Australia, to UK, to America, any part of the world. That's up to them. But some parents may prefer the national stream because the kids may have to stay here.
She said the school will be open to all surrounding villages to improve quality of education and investment on human resource development. Fabian Hakalitz, National EMTV News.
Edai Town Development Limited has established a village community company with the villages of Boira in Central Province. Director Kim Yong says through their community service obligation, they will also open a water supply project for the people of Papa and Lealea.
Villages of Papa and Lele, they're really struggling with the water. And so we're going to make sure by Christmas they can see water flowing out of the tap. And that is, and after that, our aim is they should get a piped water supply to every household.
Prime Minister Peter O'Neill has warned contractors they will be held accountable for funds they are given for the construction of school projects such as classrooms. The Prime Minister issued this warning while opening a new classroom building in Kimbe, West New Britain Province. The Prime Minister issued a stern warning to all companies involved in the construction of school projects that money from the public will be fully accounted for and documented. He said many times the government awards contracts to certain contractors who fail to complete their jobs, and this will stop. Northern Governor Gary Juffa has commended the national government's stand to review tax collecting efforts. He says line agencies must look at companies breaching Papua New Guinea's taxation laws.
The national government in 2018 will tighten up taxation laws. Governor Juffa is supporting this move and says Northern Province will start to enforce laws beginning with business houses. government-line agencies like the Labour Department, the Internal Revenue Commission and the Papua New Guinea Customs are to review the regulation and compliance systems in managing companies who avoid tax charges.
By next year onwards, we will be enforcing a lot of the line agency laws, labour, migration, customs, ICCC laws. We've already been working with these agencies to develop MOUs so that we can transfer these functions to the province. And once that's done, after we've given them a grace period to get their books in order, we're going to take a hardline approach. Everybody who operates in the province must comply with our laws. If they don't, they'll be shown the door. It's that simple, or they'll be penalized. But some companies are making a significant effort and they're improving their operations in the province, and it's heartening to see that. Not all companies are breaking the law, it's just a few. And, the companies are not just Asian companies, but also Papua New Guinean companies and other companies from other areas,
The move taken by the Oro provincial government is based on the size and past behavior of companies and the sector in which they operate.
Especially referring to revenue strategies, where the government has taken and has made an effort to concentrate on taxes that have been avoided by the forestry and fisheries sector. They're putting together a task force to look at non-compliant taxpayers, which I proposed, and I think is a very good effort. It needs to be done because a significant amount of taxes are avoided by a large number of companies, and they have not been taken to task by the IRC and by Customs. Customs and IRC have gone after companies that are mainly compliant, but they've failed to take to task those companies that aren't compliant, especially those operating in the forestry and fisheries sector, who evade taxes and make a significant amount of revenue from our resources but pay very little back to the community or to the country in taxes.
Harry Agimbari, National EMTV News.
Meanwhile, Governor Juffe has raised concerns on the quality of work by foreign companies on roads and bridges in the country. Juffe has called on the national government to ensure stringent processes are followed when awarding contracts. This is because most times, he says, quality is compromised.
The quality of the projects. The quality has been very poor. It hasn't been to the degree that I would expect. And I think the government needs to make a greater effort to say, if these are loans that we are going to pay back, we should demand the best quality work be done and the projects be of the highest possible quality. And if you go and look at the roads, bridges, airports, infrastructure that are being built by the Chinese companies that are coming and building them, they're of a very poor quality, and I think that they're not of a quality where they can be sustainable. That's my only concern about this project.
You're watching National EMTV News. We continue after these messages. Stay with us. Welcome back to National EMTV News. The National Court in Madang has ordered settlers living on portions 69, 70 and 78 at Nagada area along the north coast to vacate the land owned by the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Papua New Guinea. The court order is effective, and if settlers fail to comply by 12 noon on December the 14th, they will be forcefully removed. Last Friday, a representative from the Lutheran Church in Leh, accompanied by Madang police, went to Nagada and informed settlers peacefully to vacate the land. The Evangelical Lutheran Church is entitled to use reasonable force with the police assistance and other relevant authorities to evict the settlers without further notice. Police in Enga province have identified the suspect involved in the recent sorcery case. It's claimed they accused a 6-year-old child of sorcery and tortured her last month at Serinki. The deceased is the daughter of the late Leniata Kepara, who was also accused of sorcery and burned to death in 2012 in Mount Hagen. Tribal Foundation and Lutheran missionary in Enga province, Anton Lutz, who rescued the child, has called for immediate action to stop sorcery accusation violence in the country.
She was just 6 years old and was punished for something she knew nothing about. Justice is the name of the daughter of the late Leniata Kepara, who was falsely accused of practicing Sangoma in 2012 and burned to death in Mount Hagen. There were no prosecutions of the known killers of Leniata, and now her daughter has survived the same lack of justice. With the joint efforts of Lutheran missionary in Enga, Anton Lutz, and Tribal Foundation, the girl was rescued last month and taken to safety, where she is recovering from her wounds. Tribal Foundation's president, Gary Bustin, says horrific stories of sorcery-accused killings and gender-based violence does not truly portray PNG.
Unfortunately, we found ourselves in what we call Papua New Guinea's darkest place. And we would like all of the media to make sure that they always say that this is not a good representation of Papua New Guinea. We're taking a little bit of time to focus on something that needs to change in our country.
While efforts are being made to rescue sorcery-related violence victims in Enga province, there are more shocking stories from other provinces in the highlands and mainly in the Momase region and the autonomous region of Bougainville.
Her wounds are healing up. She will need psychological help as she grows up. But then she finds herself in a country where her mother's killers were never brought to justice. And she pays for the alleged sins of her mom, because we couldn't do much to accord her the justice that she deserves. And hence us calling her justice, it's because she deserves it.
Lutheran missionary Lutz, who has helped a lot of these victims, says the idea of sangoma or sorcery is not real. During the press conference, Mr. Lutz showed a raw footage he had collected from his work as a human rights defender. The video was shown off camera and displayed the horrifying tortures of women accused of sorcery in the highlands.
This path that we're on is not the right path for our country. This business of, especially in the highlands, torturing people on accusations and murdering them often is not the path forward, and we all know that.
Secretary of Community Development Anna Solomon said the situation in the country in relation to gender-based violence and accused sorcery-related violence has political attention.
Our plan, what kind of community capacity enhancement initiatives can we bring to the communities?
Now, could the Prime Minister finally put together a bipartisan committee from both sides of the House so that you can show him female population of this country or this parliament, even though there are no women here, that we are fairly representing and we are equally concerned about how our women are being treated across the country.
In terms of the long-term solution to some of these issues and challenges we have, Mr. Speaker, our government, as you will note in the budget, for the first time, has allocated some decent funding so that we can carry out awareness right across the country on a daily basis, whether it will be on radio or newspaper or television or at the community level. Close to about 40 million kina has been allocated for public awareness that this kind of behavior is wrong. We must continue to educate our people and change their mindset about their beliefs, particularly in sorcery and so forth. Mr. Speaker, we continue to profess ourselves as a Christian country. A Christian country means behaving like a Christian, not believing and saying something and doing something else.
An amount of 2 million kina was allocated in the 2018 budget for accused sorcery-related violence. She said the issue needs everyone's cooperation to address it.
The work that each of you have done as individuals and NGOs and churches, community-based organization, and government, especially those government public servants representing us at the district and at the rural areas. Finally, your cries have been heard.
Meanwhile, the Police Minister, Jelta Wong, told the media that the government has issued a directive for an immediate unit to be established specifically for sorcery-accused violence victims in the country. Stacey Yalo, National EMTV News.
And the story of this survivor justice has sparked concerns, calling on individuals, relevant authorities and the national government to act and for us to take ownership of violence in Papua New Guinea. Moving on, the next 36 months are crucial for Papua New Guinea as the country looks to take advantage of funding opportunities for climate change initiatives. Minister responsible for climate change, John Pundari, on his return from the recent COP23 meeting in Bonn, Germany, has highlighted this, adding, reporting measures must improve if the country has any chance of receiving support for climate change initiatives.
Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Environment, Conservation and Climate Change Minister John Pundari recently led Papua New Guinea's delegation to the Conference of Parties meeting in Bonn, Germany, where issues of climate change were discussed, issues which affect PNG in a big way. According to Minister Pundari, there are funding opportunities available especially in regards to reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, or REDD, a framework through which developing countries are rewarded financially for any emissions reductions achieved associated with a decrease in the conversion of forests to alternate land uses. Minister Pundari adds that accountability also has to improve going forward, and necessary legislation also has to be passed if PNG is to benefit from these funding streams.
Schemes of support that are available out there, we negotiated to ensuring that there is better coordination so as to giving accountable and transparent outcomes, and to strengthen national legislative frameworks going forward, and ensuring that the very custodians of this very important resource are protected insofar as their benefits are concerned.
Apart from member countries who have signed up to climate change agreements, there are also non-party businesses and individuals who have offered to assist PNG in dealing with climate change through various interventions, including carbon trading.
Papua New Guinea had to negotiate with other countries in ensuring that we gave these non-party contributors a challenge for accountability and transparency, so they become a party to this conference. Negotiations will continue to the Poland. I know that our technical people will re-engage themselves in May in Bonn before the 24th conference of the parties.
But as always, there are challenges that remain. And according to Minister Pundari, one of the most pressing is the seeming lack of commitment from developed nations in sticking to outcomes reached at the COP21 meeting in 2015, known as the Paris Agreement.
I believe, personally, we are not just doing enough. If the Paris Agreement is about ambitious targets, then the global community must rise up, and especially the developed industrialized nations must lead the way.
Fisheries Minister Patrick Bassa joined delegates from Pacific nations and fishing powers such as Europe, China and the United States at the 14th regular session of the Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission in the Philippines today. Their task is to set the rules for the world's biggest fishery. Lian Jarari brings us this report from Manila in the Philippines.
Around 700 delegates from Commission member countries and stakeholders in the global fishing industry will attend the 5-day meeting, which began this morning in Manila. The Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission is an international body that governs fishing activity, particularly for highly migratory tuna. The Commission's annual meetings are aimed at developing conservation and management measures for the tuna stock.
For us, for the Commission, the main topic this session is the tropical tuna measure, a replacement bridging tropical tuna measure, which governs the management of the tuna, longline and purse seine fisheries, which is of great importance to Pacific Island countries. We are, however, also looking for a management measure with regard to southern albacore, and then there are a number of other quite important measures, but it's tropical tuna that certainly is the most important, and we do want to make progress on southern albacore issue as well.
Papua New Guinea, a member of the Commission and the second largest tuna producer amongst the Pacific Island countries, had a seat at the table and urged the Commission to focus on its main mandate, to manage fishing efforts in the high seas and to address the issue of disproportionate burden resource-owning countries like PNG face in putting conservation measures into effect. The Western and Central Pacific is home to the world's largest tuna fishery, yielding 56% of the total catch in 2016. Most of the largest tuna fleets in the world operate in the WCPFC convention area. Fisheries Minister Patrick Bassa emphasized Papua New Guinea's position that the zone-based measures that have delivered economic benefit to Pacific nations should not be undermined. Lian Jarari, National EMTV News, Manila.
His Eminence Cardinal Sir John Ribat says government-line agencies, churches and individuals must work closely with the media to expose issues of gender-based violence in the country. Many stories remain untold, which has lacked intervention by the political leadership. Cardinal Ribat thanked international agencies, amongst others, like the UN AIDS, including churches, for their tireless efforts in addressing these issues, especially on gender-based violence and HIV/AIDS.
To be able to bring our message out clear to our people, knowing that we are...
Cardinal Ribat was speaking at the UN Women Media Awards ceremony in Port Moresby on Friday. The event was held in conjunction with the World AIDS Day to acknowledge the role of media in advocating and reporting on two very sensitive issues, gender-based violence and HIV and AIDS. The Cardinal said it is important for media to work closely with NGOs and churches to stop stigma and ignorance.
And of course, this issue, it's not only for a group of people, but it is really for the whole nation. And the efforts by all organizations, UNAIDS, the UN Women and UNAIDS media, that what you are doing is really an encouragement to our people to bring out the thinking and the efforts that we all put together to be able to make known our efforts, and also the intention to be able to encourage people to be united, joining together with that one aim to address these issues. And
gender-based violence and HIV and AIDS are very common issues found in communities. NGOs, churches and the media have played a vital role in breaking barriers and bridging communities through awareness in some of the most remote areas of the country.
It is often said that education is the vaccine against HIV and gender-based violence. Media organizations fulfill this challenge by promoting awareness, educating listeners and viewers about the facts.
In the awards category, reporting on gender-based violence went to NBC KVN's journalist, Rolin Likas, for her report on the brutal rape and murder of a 7-year-old girl in New Ireland province.
We as the media, our role is to speak out all government agencies responsible to create an effective referral pathway for victims and survivors of gender-based violence.
Recipient of the Excellence in Reporting on HIV and AIDS was national newspaper journalist Ogia Maimo, together with Papers editor Christina Parker-Cotta for Excellence in Editorial Leadership.
The issue is a very complex issue. It's not just a simple issue that any journalist can cover. It's very complex. So the main thing is for journalists to know what they're reporting about, and if they do know what they're reporting about and what they want to achieve, and the audience and the base audience they want to portray the message to, they will do a good job. It's not an easy job to do this.
Excellence in photojournalism went to journalist Imelda Wavik.
A very negative thing. It affects in a very negative way on people's lives. And yeah, I mean, if I can report and if it can change the lives and perspective of people in their lives, then why not, you know?
MTV's Women World was also recognized in the Excellence in Communication. PNG Media Council President Neville Choi said that journalists, just like every citizen, are exposed to gender-based violence and HIV and AIDS and play a vital role in addressing these issues through their stories.
And upcoming journalists who get into these rounds need to prepare themselves for a lot of very upfront situations, and they need to be prepared for, they have to be very conscious of what they're writing, the impact that their writing has in regards to these issues. They're very sensitive issues. A lot of people don't like to talk about them, so they have to be ready to go that extra mile.
Adelaide Sirox Kari, National MTV News.
You're watching National MTV News. We continue after these messages with stories making headlines overseas. Don't go away. Welcome back to National MTV News. Turning overseas now, Pope Francis used the word everyone has been listening for in Bangladesh. On Friday, he referred to Rohingya Muslims by name. Activists were upset he did not use the word Rohingya in Myanmar.
Pope Francis has had the last word on criticism throughout this trip that he refused to call the Rohingya by name. Meeting with a group of 16 Rohingya refugees on his final night in Dhaka, the Pope said the presence of God today is also called Rohingya. And he called on the world to continue to work for their rights. And he said their plight was an example of the world's egotism. The Pope was criticized previously in Myanmar for not using the word. The Vatican said this was a diplomatic trip, so the thinking is that the Pope avoided a term which for the Myanmar government is offensive and might risk shutting down dialogue and finding a political solution to the crisis. On Saturday, Pope Francis meets with Mother Teresa's Missionaries of Charity at a house which Mother Teresa established here in 1976. And then he will meet with a group of Bangladeshi young people before heading back to Rome.
A momentous day, certainly, for the Trump administration. The president's former national security advisor pleading guilty to a federal court in Washington.
President Trump's former national security advisor Michael Flynn arriving at a federal courthouse in Washington today before pleading guilty to lying to the FBI, making him the first person who worked inside the White House to be charged in the Russia probe and the fourth campaign official to face charges so far. The charge and plea agreement center around conversations he had with then Russian ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Kislyak, in December of last year. Court documents show that others on the Trump team knew of Flynn's efforts. On December 29th, Flynn called former Deputy National Security Advisor K.T. McFarland along with other transition officials at Mar-a-Lago, where they discussed what to say to Kislyak about the new sanctions being imposed on Russia by the Obama administration. According to Flynn, the transition officials did not want Russia to escalate the situation. Flynn immediately called Kislyak, asking Russia not to overreact to those sanctions. Shortly after that call, Flynn briefed McFarland that he did indeed discuss sanctions with the ambassador, according to two people familiar with the matter. But in January, then Vice President-elect Mike Pence told the nation that Flynn assured him he did not talk about sanctions with Kislyak.
They did not discuss anything having to do with the United States' decision to expel diplomats or impose a censure against Russia.
Then, on December 31st, 3 days after their conversation about sanctions, Kislyak confirmed to Flynn that Russia had chosen not to retaliate in response to Flynn's request. Also today, court documents revealed another interaction Flynn had with Kislyak, calling him at the direction of a, quote, very senior member of the transition about a coming UN Security Council vote on Israeli settlements. Sources tell CNN that person was Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. According to the filing, Flynn and Kislyak spoke about the incoming administration's opposition to the resolution and asked Russia to delay or vote against it. CNN can also now report that there were intelligence intercepts that picked up Kushner conversations with foreign intelligence targets, talking about efforts to stop the resolution, according to an official briefed on the matter. Flynn didn't respond to shouted questions when leaving the courthouse today, and afterward visited his son Michael Flynn Jr., who is also a potential target of the Russia investigation. In a statement, Flynn acknowledged wrongdoing, saying, "My guilty plea and agreement to cooperate with the special counsel's office reflect a decision I made in the best interests of my family and of our country." Last month, Trump's former campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his deputy Rick Gates were indicted for conspiracy to launder money, among other charges. Both men have pleaded not guilty. And Trump campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about his communications with Russian nationals. The White House tried to downplay the significance of the Flynn revelations today, with one source close to the president telling CNN that everyone lies in Washington. President Trump has long maintained there was no collusion with his campaign and Russia.
The entire thing has been a witch hunt, and there is no collusion between certainly myself and my campaign. But I can always speak for myself and the Russians, zero.
But as the investigation intensifies, so does the scrutiny on the president and his inner circle.
Michael Flynn and this plea agreement now faces up to 5 years in prison. But if he had been charged with every count of lying listed in the court documents released Friday, he could have faced 35 years in prison at least.
Is it safe to celebrate Christmas? That is the question being asked across Germany as traditional holiday markets open nationwide. A year ago, terrorists struck a market, and many Germans are warned something similar could happen again.
Defiant and determined, Germans rolled out an honoured holiday tradition this week. The opening of Christmas markets across the country.
We can't go around being frightened of everything.
We have to orient ourselves around the fact that we live our lives as normal.
But it's not really normal. There is heightened security, a stepped-up police presence and large concrete barriers. The memory of last December is still fresh in the minds of many here. That's when authorities say a 24-year-old Tunisian man ploughed a truck into a Berlin market, killing 12.
We know what happened, and it moves us, but we also agree just as strongly that we live together and that what makes this city is its openness and freedom, tolerance, and we will not let that be taken from us or broken.
A spirit that's seen the Berlin market transformed into a children's paradise and a holiday reveller's dream. And the shoppers and tourists are honouring that German tradition by flocking to the markets.
The Berliners are in good form, and they carry on anyway, right? What else can one do?
This market decided to have a little fun with the concrete security barriers, wrapped as Christmas gifts.
It makes it less scary for the children. They see them as presents, and if there were just concrete blocks sitting there, they would maybe ask themselves questions.
In Berlin, one of the highlights of the market opening ceremony was a tribute to those who perished in last December's attack. A bed of roses to celebrate the lives of the 12 victims.
And this is the other thing which I've consciously taken notice of, that the Berliners and the many guests of this city, despite the shock and dismay, maybe even because of this, have developed a brave defiance.
A brave defiance that is spurring on a cherished tradition.
Female coalition parties in Australia have begun speaking out about the need for women to be elected into Liberal and National seats. They are frustrated that no solution to the problems are being found, so they are speaking out and have a message for the party: win women, win government.
We'll probably pay a price with our party members, potentially, for talking once again about the women issue within the party.
Liberal Senator Jane Hume sums up a common anxiety among her female colleagues. The party has a woman problem. Few want to talk about it.
I think if we told you that there wasn't a bit of a collective eye roll when we start talking about the women's issue, we'd be lying.
The problem is easy to measure. Women make up just 22% of Liberals in federal parliament. For Labor, it's 45%.
There is a business case for increasing the number of women in parliament.
The party's not just struggling to get women into parliament, it's also struggling to get women to vote for it. One of the big reasons, a lack of role models. When Julia Gillard won the 2010 election, Labor's female vote jumped by 7%.
Women make amazing MPs, but sometimes they just need to see other women and hear from other women and see that it is possible.
Of the 84 Liberal MPs in federal parliament, just 18 are women. This is reflected in the young Liberal movement and broader party membership, where men greatly outnumber women. The problem? Pre-selections. Men are much more likely to win pre-selection for winnable seats, while women are overwhelmingly chosen for marginal seats. Take the 2016 election. The Liberals put forward 38 female candidates, more than ever before, but only 3 were chosen to contest safe seats.
I think unconscious bias needs to be recognised, and the only way to do that is, as the business community have shown us, is to set measurable, achievable targets.
The Labor Party's used quotas since 1994 to get more women into Parliament, and in 20 years it's more than doubled its female representation. Compare that to the Coalition, which has only managed a 10% increase in the same time period. Most Liberals hate the idea of quotas, but not all of them.
The meritocracy argument is flawed. To really get to that 50-50 quickly, a quota is a much harder measure.
Determined to avoid the Q word, the Liberals have set a target to get 50-50 representation by 2025. Linda Reynolds is optimistic and points to the UK Conservative Party, which has managed to get more women into Parliament by overhauling its pre-selection process.
Their business case is once their vote falls below 40%, the Conservative Party will not win. They've realised to win they need more women.
I just don't think it's on the agenda.
Liberal Melissa Price says the change needs to happen at the state and branch level where candidates are actually pre-selected. The party may have a gender target, but it's not measured and no one's held accountable.
I think the Labor Party needs to now have a look at these targets and actually commit to the targets.
But these Liberal women realise they also need to play a part and start actively recruiting, mentoring and sponsoring future female politicians.
For women like us and for the men who do champion change to stand up and say, you know, it's time.
Or the party will pay the price at the ballot box.
Here with National EMTV News. When we come back, some sporting updates in Trukai Sports. Stay tuned.
Trukai Sports.
Welcome to Trukai Sports. We begin with the Rugby League World Cup, and Australia has recorded a double victory as champions of the 2017 Rugby League World Cup in both the men's and women's finals. The undefeated Kangaroos thrashed England 6-0, while the Jillaroos defeated New Zealand Ferns 24-16.
Sloppy play the ball, referee says OK. Smith, now Cronk, here's Morgan, Cordner into space, Cordner over Winnett, and Cordner gets the first try of the Rugby League World Cup final. The Aussies are in, they lead by 4, and sheer weight of possession gets one. Gale at the back to Brown, now hopped down the touchline, somehow kept it in and then monstered by Gillett was Bateman. I don't know how. Coming back to the short side, Morgan's with him. Morgan will score. The Kangaroos have gone from one end to the other, although we're going. I think it's no try. I think that's the way they're going to rule it. You could argue either way. Well, I think it's clearly no try, but there it is. I think already we've seen line breaks. Oh, the shot there on Whitehead from Boyd Cordner. The head rocked back. The Kangaroos have done it. They have won the World Cup on home soil. And Cameron Smith crowns an extraordinary year as he leads his nation to victory.
And there's going to be a National Rugby League women's competition next year. Obviously, they've been inspired by the AFL women's competition, a great initiative. Now, the Women's World Cup has been described as fantastic to actually expose people to the quality of football that women play. Now, let's take a look at yesterday's grand final between Australia Jillaroos and New Zealand Ferns with a final score 24-16.
This is McGregor. Again at first receiver, kick through it, came off a Ferns player's leg, it's play on, Isabel Kelly. Here's Brigginshaw out of acting half, licks up there out of Walton, and Brayley goes out, a field goal coming up to Caitlin Moran, and there it is, she's got it. Caitlin Moran has got the field goal, and the Jillaroos defend their World Cup.
To rugby union now, the 10-city tournament spins the globe before teams turn their attention to the Rugby World Cup Sevens in San Francisco. For the first time, the United States is hosting this tournament.
Particularly, you see the other team sheets going out on social media and you're thinking, wow, there's some strong players out there, some strong teams coming into it. And I think it's going to be a stronger competition than it was last year.
And Trukai Sports continues after these messages. Don't go away.
Trukai Sports.
Still on football, parties continue on in one part of Brazil as for the first time in 2 decades, Grêmio's football team can rightfully call themselves the pride of South America. They won the Copa Libertadores title for the first time since 1995.
Look what it means to the players. Grêmio is a club this triumph adding to their previous successes back in 1983 and 22 years ago. Congratulations to them. Want to know how excited these players were? Just look at this. The entire team interrupting their head coach and his post-match press conference to celebrate with their manager, Renato Portaluppi. Happily, though, order was restored eventually. The coach was overwhelmed and apparently doused with celebratory drink. What a moment, too, for Portaluppi. He now becomes the first Brazilian to win the Copa Libertadores as a player and as a head coach as well. Well, the scenes were similar down in Brazil outside Porto Alegre, where Grêmio is based. Literally thousands of the team's fans piling out onto the streets to celebrate a very famous victory. Look at that. Peru, eat your heart out. And I imagine a fair few of them will have been among the 30,000 inside Grêmio's home ground as well to see the historic occasion on a big screen. This is the third time the club have been crowned champions of South America. The triumph also seeing them qualify for next week's Club World Cup as well, which takes place in the UAE.
And that's it for Trukai Sports. When we come back, the weather details for the next 24 hours.
Trukai Sports. Trukai Sports.
The weather details are proudly brought to you by Dulux Weather Shield. Worth doing with Dulux.
A look at the weather forecast for the next 24 hours. In the southern region, evening showers expected in Port Moresby, cloudy periods in Daru, a shower or two for Kerma, Alotau and Popondetta. To the Momasa region, showers expected in Lae and Wau, thundery showers in Madang, showers and thunderstorms Wewak and Vanimo. To the New Guinea Islands region, showers expected in Kokopo, Rabaul, Kimbe and Buka, showers and thunderstorms for Lorengau and Kavieng. And in the Highlands region, Mount Hagen, Goroka, Kundia, Mendi and Wabeg, all these major centres can expect showers over the next 24 hours with morning fog.
The weather details are proudly brought to you by Dulux Weather Shield. Worth doing with Dulux.
And that's a new sports and weather for today, Sunday, the 3rd of December 2017. Before we go, we leave you with a spectacular performance by the Sun Up One Time Youth at the recent Media Awards. The take-home message of Stop Violence in PNG. On behalf of the EMTV News team, pleasant viewing. Good night.
So stand up and stand together. To fight this disease, we need an army of ordinary Papua New Guineans to stand up and say no more, to stand up and say stop. We refuse to let this go on. Violence is not alone. Violence is not typical. Stop saying that. It's wrong.